Hello, 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 everybody out there in the Eat the Rich Nation. Dwight here, and I will be your steward for this week's Patreon. We've got a lot to go through today, so let's get it started. The first thing that I wanted to talk about today is something that we didn't get talk about in the last show with Ken Klippenstein, where we talked about Elon Musk. And, I actually just finished listening to it today, and I was just like, still stunned at the amount of things that happened that Elon Musk produces that's totally crazy and insane and awful and generally deleterious for everybody around him, including, natural resources in foreign countries. But there was one thing that I just kind of wanted to focus on that I think kind of paints a broader picture. So let's take a listen to it. What I'm going to read from is an Atlantic article from February this year, from earlier this year, by Marina Karen. And the title of it is, Why SpaceX Wants a Tiny Texas Neighborhood So Badly. The residents of Boca Chica didn't ask Elon Musk to move in, but now his new company is taking over. I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but I want to read enough for us to understand together what's actually happening in what was a very nice, kind of quiet Gulf Shore town in South Texas near the Mexican border, near Matamoros and Brownsville. So here we go, reading from this Atlantic article from Boca Chica, Texas. Mary McConaughey was watching from her car when the rocket exploded on the beach. The steel-crunching burst sent the top of the spacecraft flying, and a cloud of vapor billowed into the sky and drifted towards the water. McConaughey and her husband had planned to drive into town that day, late in November, but when they pulled onto the street, they noticed a roadblock, a clear sign that SpaceX technicians were preparing to test hardware. She didn't want to miss anything, so she turned toward the launch pad, parked her car at the end of the nearby street, and got her camera ready. The dramatic test was a crucial step in one of Elon Musk's most cherished and ambitious projects, the very reason, in fact, he founded SpaceX in 2002. Weeks earlier, Musk had stood in front of the prototype, 164 feet of gleaming stainless steel, so archetypically spaceship-like that it could have been a borrowed prop from a science fiction movie, and beamed. He envisions that the completed transportation system, a spaceship and rocket combo named Starship, fucking very original, will carry passengers as far away as Mars. Hopefully not before that. A few months before the explosion, hundreds of people came to the facility in South Texas on the edge of the Gulf Coast to see the spaceship, and thousands more watched online. Oh, I gotta do the voice. It's really gonna be pretty epic to see that thing take off and come back. As if he were seeing the finished Starship in front of him. McConaughey was there and even posed for a picture with Musk. At the end of the night, she made the short trip home to her house on a small road lined with stout palm trees. McConaughey lives in Boca Chica Village, a tiny neighborhood located in startling proximity to SpaceX's facilities. Many of the village's residents had lived there for years, long before SpaceX arrived, some before the company even existed. I love this. Friction between next-door neighbors is quite different from when one of them is a rocket company. Instead of an ugly fence, there might be an ugly fence with massive tanks of cryogenic liquid behind it. When residents find paper stuck to their front door, the notes don't ask them to keep the noise down or clean up after their dogs. They warn them that their windows could shatter. Oh, Jesus. Boca Chica's residents have learned to live with the rocket company, or at least tolerate it, for over 5 years. But SpaceX's work is about to become even more disruptive. The explosion certainly made that clear. So the company has offered to buy their homes. Some have taken the offer. Others, such as McConaughey, have rejected it. Even as Musk prepares to launch a giant rocket ship just a short hop from their houses, SpaceX is already hard at work on their next Starship prototype, and Musk says the company might launch it into orbit as soon as this year. "We love Texas," James Gleason, a SpaceX spokesperson, said in a statement, "and believe we are entering a new and exciting era in space exploration." Yeah, just, of course, if you're not in space, it's actually quite fucked up for you to be near the launch pad. Few people in this part of South Texas could have predicted the recent trajectory of their life when SpaceX moved in. They have become space fanatics and legal experts, Musk's supporters, and thorns in his side, trying to make sense of their place in a strange story that may someday end millions of miles away from Earth, all because they have new neighbors. I'm going to skip a lot of this just because it kind of just paints a picture of what a nice kind of area this is down in Texas, kind of a sleepy area that's being and contrasting with, what their SpaceX is doing. And they say, like, Falcon 9 rockets and all this stuff. It's pretty intense. But let's just go down to some really interesting points of this and try to draw this together. A few days earlier, this is just speaking back from a previous from the beginning of SpaceX being there. A few days earlier, SpaceX had bought its first piece of land from the county. Texas had heavily courted SpaceX since 2011 with millions of dollars in incentives and legislation that would limit public access to beaches along the Gulf. SpaceX, the thinking went, could commandeer the coastline as needed. A review by the Federal Aviation Administration eventually found that rocket operations wouldn't cause any significant environmental impacts, clearing the way for SpaceX to get started. In spring of 2013, hundreds of people showed up to another meeting in some in Launch Brownsville t-shirts, and a state official read aloud a letter of support from then Governor Rick Perry. Fuck. So just pause here and just analyze what's happening. The state of Texas, which is, I could say, famously business friendly and certainly environmentally unfriendly, I could say as a whole, is offering millions of dollars in incentives to SpaceX to come there and build their rocket facility. So they are diverting. For those that don't understand, millions of dollars in incentives means that they are giving a private company that amount of money out of tax revenue that should be going to support the activities of the state and government assistance and things that you need for a state to run. So the state is foregoing that, and the FAA is saying we are going to allow for some amount of environmental destruction. Of course, this is very important lawyer speak here. They say that found that rocket operations wouldn't cause any significant environmental impacts. So the FAA, the federal administration, is allowing for some amount of environmental destruction based off of this private company's exploits. So let's move on here. We're just going to skip down a little bit. Elsewhere, SpaceX was making progress, punctuated by a fiery blaze or two. That's a fucking understatement. Falcon 9 rocket exploded during takeoff. The company recovered a rocket booster after launching it into orbit, gently guiding it back to the ground, an industry first. Then another rocket blew up. The company got better at reusing boosters and returning them in one piece. In Florida, the inaugural launch of the Falcon Heavy, the most powerful rocket in operation today, was a milestone for SpaceX, and it turned out for Boca Chica Village. I think it gives me a lot of faith for our next architecture, our interplanetary spaceship, Musk said at a press conference after the launch in 2018. Forget about routine Falcon 9 launches. He wanted to test his new vehicle, the Starship, at the company's location in South Texas. This is Musk speaking. We've got a lot of land with nobody around, so if it blows up, it's cool, Musk said. Don't forget, I hope you've all listened to the Elon Musk episode with Ken Klippenstein, because what we find out from him is that he's really no engineer, and he certainly isn't one of the engineers that's working on these rockets to try to make them work. What he is a showman. What he is a guy that uses these kind of rhetorical flourishes to speak directly to his supporters. I mean, think about that for a second. We've got a lot of land with nobody around, so if it blows up, it's cool. It's not cool. It's not okay. Even for a CEO to say that, I would argue, is irresponsible, because if it's investor money or something like that, it's not the right thing to say. But it doesn't matter, because his cachet is so much more important than the actual results that he produces. His job is to enrich himself and to increase stock prices, and you do that by using these rhetorical flourishes. But anyway, let's continue here. That December, a mysterious tower rose at SpaceX's construction site in Boca Chica. Users on NASAspaceflight.com exchanged guesses about what the cylinder of patched-together metal could be. A water tower, probably? But then workers sliced holes into the structure and gave it legs. Gene Gore drove over early one morning. The sun hadn't risen yet when he saw a gleam in the dark next to the mystery structure. I'd never seen a rocket, but it looked like the nose cone of a rocket, Gore told me. That was the first time anybody had seen it, and then it was apparent. Oh, they're really building a rocket here. Around the time the, quote, water tower showed up, Rosemarie Workman and her husband were returning from Brownsville with groceries when their car was stopped near the village. Residents are used to checkpoints. There's a U.S. Border Patrol stop on State Highway 4 when you're heading toward Brownsville and away from the Mexican border. This checkpoint was different. Instead of a border agent in the dark green military uniform or a car-sniffing German shepherd, a SpaceX employee approached their car and asked the couple were they on, quote, on his list. Workman was stunned. She and her husband had owned their home in Boca Chica for 20 years. I should not have to be on a list, Workman told me. Besides that, why would a SpaceX employee have the authorization to stop me on a state highway and tell me I can't go through? To meet safety requirements from federal and county regulators, SpaceX sets up 2 checkpoints during launch operations, including testing. Only SpaceX personnel and village residents can pass through the first checkpoint, about 15 miles out from Boca Chica and State Highway 4. Homeowners can add names to the list, but visitors must stay on their host's property during road closures or they risk arrest for trespassing. No one is allowed past the second checkpoint near the village, beyond any homes and closer to the launch pad, an area the FAA says isn't safe during testing. So I don't know if I want to go too much farther into this here. There's quite a bit more to read. I think what's interesting to note here, the point of what I wanted to read from this, aside from the fact that, like, I don't quite get this, what's the point of this, is if we zoom out, we're realizing that this is a private company. This is a private company that the business-friendly government has allowed to constrain the rights of citizens, even when they are the ones that have historically owned their own neighborhood. Again, people that have lived there for many decades now have to get clearance from a private company to allow for people to have access to their own homes. In order to have their families over, in order to have friends over, in order to host people in their home, they need to clear it with a private company. I don't think I need to explain why that's horrible and weird and shouldn't be the case. I mean, I understand that in general, space exploration and science as an end in itself is important for us to do. However, when it's done by a private company without any public oversight, then it allows for them to kind of make this little kingdom down in the Texas shore without any with its kind of own state blessed sovereignty. I think it sets an extremely weird precedent. And moreover, I don't know, to my knowledge, they've only sent 1 rocket up to the International Space Station. Again, this is, and of course, it was being lauded as, oh, Elon Musk is going to make space travel cheaper. Well, it sounds like it may be cheaper on the face of it, but keep in mind, they have incurred, the state of Texas and the people that pay taxes have incurred millions of dollars in cuts, have lost tax revenue from this company in order to do this. So it's not necessarily making space travel cheaper, it's just changing the fiduciary transaction and putting that cost onto an inobvious amount of people, which is, the people of the state of Texas. What is going to get worse for the people in Texas by not having that taxpayer revenue? Are schools going to get worse? Are we not going to be able to buy PPE for teachers that are going to do their, classroom settings during this coronavirus? What is going to get worse because SpaceX is going to be able to do this cheaper because they're getting millions of dollars in tax revenue? I think space exploration should be done ideally by a government agency that has public oversight. And obviously, this is let's just call it a neoliberal program to move a lot of the operations of United States space exploration away from NASA and put it in the hands of a private company, and at the same time, enriching like a single dude who's a douche. So what the fuck is the point? I don't get it. So let's move on from this now. Thank you for sticking with us to kind of close up that part about Elon Musk. So here's something that I really wanted to share with you guys, because I don't know if you realize this, and if you're American, and if you're an American citizen, American passport holder, this affects you, and we really need to discuss this and talk about this. I don't know if you realize this. I'm just going to get to the point. But as of right now, there are only 28 countries that you can go to with an American passport. Well, technically it's like 23, but there's 5 of them that have a 14-day quarantine period. I want to say that again. Your passport can't get you in to anywhere except for 28 countries in the world right now. We are banned from travel. I'm going to read to you from a Medium article from Indy Samarajiva, and it's called "American Passports Are Worthless Now. The Places You Can't Go." And let's just read the whole thing because it's actually quite short and understand what a fucking pickle we're in right now. Okay, let's check it out. America is not united anymore, and it's barely a state. They have crashed right through failed state and into plague state, unwelcome across the world. This has been predicted. Now it has come to pass. Just look at the map, and we're just looking at a map of if you look at the article, all the countries that are blacked out that we can't travel to. Americans have gone from having access to most of the world to being banned from most of it. Today, Americans are only allowed in a few Caribbean islands and the Balkans. An American passport is now worthless, worse than worthless, it's a plague. In the absence of a humane government, America is now ruled by COVID-19. Welcome to the plague states of America. It's difficult to think for Americans to understand that they are, to use an epidemiological term, completely fucked. COVID-19 could have been managed in January or February or even now, but not a full year later in 2021. Given that you need a functioning government to manage this pandemic, that's the soonest Americans can get one. And again, that's fucking not count our chickens. You know what I'm saying? The most reliable projections are saying 200,000 dead and 50 million infected by Election Day in November. Even these projections struggle to account for completely irrational federal actions like denigrating masks, pushing to reopen early, and pushing students back into schools. That one really fucking blows my mind. This is not an absence of public health. It is the opposite. It is, in effect, governance by COVID-19, not a failed state, a plague state. Even after Election Day, Donald Trump will still be in power for nearly 3 months until January 20th. Besides impeaching a dead duck president, there's nothing America can do but wait. I'm not going to agree with that, but while COVID-19 grows ever stronger, America will be lucky to exit this pandemic with less than 1 million dead and 100 million infected. The living will be lucky to exit their country within the next 5 years. Fuck. Welcome to the club. Post-colonial bullshit and racism have made my Sri Lankan passport worthless for years. Now the American passport is worse. America has crashed straight through the third world into the fourth. Here is a list in total of all the places Americans can go, most of them small Caribbean islands. Here's the list of places you can go currently with an American passport. Albania, Antigua and Barbuda, Aruba, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, Croatia, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, French Polynesia, Ireland, Jamaica, Kosovo, South Korea, Lebanon, the Maldives, Mexico, North Macedonia, St. Lucia, St. Martin, St. Vincent, Serbia, Tanzania, Turkey, Turks and Caicos, Ukraine, the UAE, and the UK. And out of those, Ecuador, Ireland, South Korea, UAE, and UK, there's a 14-day quarantine. That's it. That's where we can go. That's it. That's as much as we can travel, is those places. Americans now have access to exactly 24 states, 5 more if they want to endure a 14-day quarantine on the end. Americans have gone from world power to getting the side eye from Ecuador in a matter of months. Right now, Americans are only really welcome on remote islands or corralled to resorts in Mexico where they can be isolated from everyone else. It's not that other nations don't want to welcome Americans, they just can't. The point of a passport is that a sovereign power vouches for its bearer, but America cannot vouch for the health of its citizens at all. Americans' public health regime is far less trustworthy than Liberia's, which is actually quite good. Its sovereign is mad. At this time, you can't trust Americans. Americans have poor hygiene, a low masking rate, and at least 40% of the population can't be trusted even to believe that COVID exists, let alone to be taken seriously. They're likely to refuse testing, not report symptoms, break quarantine, and generally not follow rules. Americans have a toxic combination of ignorance and arrogance that allows for them, that makes them unwelcome travelers. They have a lot of problems, and they're bringing these problems with them. Some of them, I assume, are good people, but it doesn't matter. It's a plague passport, return to sender. So, some of that is a little hyperbolic, but the reality is, that is the reason that countries are closing their borders to us. I don't think that it's, you know me, I tend to have a little bit of wanton compassion for people, even those that say like, well, why should I wear a mask? It's not that I think that that's rational behavior or whatever, but I think there's reasons for that behavior. We could say that people in general, I think, are totally understandably completely untrusting of the liberal institutions that are here to safeguard us because they've been, but of course they don't tend to understand that the reason that they have been eroded is because of a systematic and long-standing attrition of these institutions that are meant to safeguard us by the capitalist class that has to pay for them, right? Because they don't want to do that. Because an empowered working class, a taken care of working class, a healthy working class, an employed working class is not a working class that can be exploited easily. And so there's been a long-standing campaign to make sure that we are inured to pain and suffering. And unfortunately, anybody that says, well, fuck you, I'm not wearing a mask, they are propagandized successfully and are playing into that entirely. And we are all of us are fucked because of that. I mean, imagine you're an American passport holder and you have family in Yemen that need your help or something. Imagine if you're an American passport holder and whatever, you have relatives elsewhere in the world. When are you going to get to see them? If you don't live with your extended family, I mean, how many of us listening haven't had the chance to like hug people that we miss or see them? I mean, like even just on like a psychological level, and I'm no medical professional. God, it always makes me nervous when I start a sentence with that. But one of the treatments, for instance, of depression, if excluding medication, is like socializing and being with people, spending time with people. It is extremely important to our mental health and thusly extremely important to our physical health, because chronic stress and depression are precursors for disease and disorders that you can incur. All of this is, if this isn't a nationalist or a fascistic symptom, I don't know what else to call it. I don't know if, and I don't know, I wonder how many of you realize that this was even something that we had to, that was happening to us. What struck me when I was thinking about it this morning was like, if the imperial apparatus is there to ensure American exceptionalism and American empire, and it's not even allowing you to do that, what the fuck is it good for except to just create its own roiling fucking human centipede of taking our tax dollars and enriching the military-industrial complex and their shareholders? It's fucking insane to me. It's fucking insane. And this is end stage capitalism. This is the end of capitalism. This is what it looks like. We can't even interact with the rest of the world as we could under, the fucking insane neoliberal go-go capitalism of like the 80s and 90s and shit. That's fucking over. That's it. That's done. And now we're left just with ourselves to fucking fight with each other over whether or not to wear a mask. Because, let's slow down. I'm going to fucking pop a blood vessel in my eye before anything happens. Anyway, this is something that's extremely important for us to understand, is that when they say, if you don't like it, you can leave. No, you can't. There is no other option. We're stuck here together. This is it. This is us. This is what we got. And I'm just going to go back to one thing where I think I paused here, where it said, that the only thing we can do is just wait. All we can do is just wait until Joe Biden's president. Guys, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. We're going to have to do something about this. We can't wait. The stakes are too high. And in fact, if we're excavating that even more, I don't know if you've seen, you know what? Give me a second. With the magic of editing, it's going to happen just like this. You're not going to know that I spent 20 minutes searching for this article I've been looking for fucking 2 weeks. Give me a second. Anyway, this is an extremely important point that I don't think people are realizing, and I want to share with you now. And I'm going to read from the Washington Post to illustrate this from an article that came out on the 2nd of July called "Heart Conditions Drove Spike in Deaths Beyond Those Attributed to COVID-19. Fear of seeking care in hospitals overwhelmed by the pandemic may have caused thousands of deaths." Check this out. The coronavirus killed tens of thousands in the United States during the pandemic's first months, but it also left a lesser-known toll. Thousands more deaths than would have been expected from heart disease and a handful of other medical conditions, according to analysis of federal data by the Washington Post. The analysis suggests that in 5 hard-hit states and New York City, there were 8,300 more deaths from heart problems than would have been typical in March, April, and May, an increase of roughly 27% over historical averages. That spike contributed to Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, and New York State and the city having a combined 75,000 excess deaths during that period. 17,000 more than the number officially attributed to COVID-19. While several experts said some of the excess deaths in the analysis were almost certainly unrecognized fatalities from COVID-19, the review suggests that many patients suffering from serious conditions died as a result of delaying or not seeking care as the outbreak progressed and swamped some hospitals. So let me just speak to that plainly. You are a patient with heart disease or a pulmonary condition or diabetes or maybe a proclivity for cancer or something like that, and you didn't go to the doctor because the entire American health system was completely overwhelmed with the pandemic. And because of that, you weren't able to get the proper treatment, you weren't able to be prescribed a medication, you weren't able to get screening, and you died. Deaths have spiked outside of coronavirus as well because the American healthcare system is completely fucked and overwhelmed by COVID-19. It was stretched thin as it was. It was ineffective and poorly functioning as it was. I don't know if you realize this, but like a lot of people die from the flu every year. Do you know how many people get the flu shot every year? About 50% of the population. Why does the other 50% not get it? Because we can't afford it. Or you know how much it costs to get a flu shot? You can't afford it. Or you make the internal calculation to be like, look, I don't think I'm going to get it, or I'm in an age cohort that may not, get it. So I'm not going to, waste the whatever, 50, 70, $100 that it takes to get the thing because I'm uninsured. But if you get it, okay, you might be in an age cohort or a health cohort that might survive it, but then you spread it. And it's what a fucking joke, man. I'm just going to read another part of this here. As states in the South and West restart their economies and see new cases surge, the excess deaths should serve as a cautionary tale, said Nahid Badalia, a medical director of Boston University School of Medicine's Special Pathogens Unit. This data underlines the importance of not letting our health systems get to the point where they're so overwhelmed that it spills over and affects people with other medical conditions in our community, she said. Too late. Too bad. That ship sailed. We forfeited that opportunity by not having single-payer health care and a healthy population of workers. We forfeited that opportunity when the neo-fascistic administration said that this was a hoax or called it the China virus or the fucking Wuhan flu or whatever. We forfeited that. We've killed people because of that. Sorry. That's done. That's happened. Yeah, and I'm reading on to the rest of this part. I mean, this is just an example of it. It says, New York City, which reports its COVID-19 statistics separately from the state, quickly became the epicenter of the pandemic in the United States and saw more than 4,700 excess deaths from heart disease. Again, 4,700 people dead, family members dead from heart disease because they couldn't get to a doctor. More than 4 times the number of any other jurisdiction the Post examined. Puskas, I don't remember, we didn't hear who this person was, but Puskas said that even at the height of the outbreak, when his hospital was nearly overwhelmed by the pandemic response, it didn't turn away anyone seeking care. Yet, the number of cardiovascular patients showing up remained low, he said. Healthcare providers everywhere are now reckoning with the consequences. All those patients that would typically have been there having cardiovascular care were not there. Those who would have had emergency life-saving care did not receive that care, and then they became one of the statistics on your chart. What the fuck? This is heartbreaking. In many cases, experts said patients suffered through the cardiac events, strokes, hyperglycemia, and other health difficulties at home, likely fearful of seeking care in hospitals where large numbers of people suffering from COVID-19 were receiving treatment. Can you imagine being a family member of somebody going through a cardiac event or a stroke or something at home and doing your best to comfort them, scared to be able to bring them into the hospital because you're worried for yourself or worried that the person that's already in a medically precarious state is going to contract COVID-19? With the lack of information that was there, we didn't build an infrastructure to be able to handle this. And now they're dead and they're gone. It is entirely preventable. That's a choice. I'm sorry I'm being dour, but I'm fucking mad. I'm fucking mad. It's just so fucking insane. And now that we're kind of like doing a post-mortem about these things, even though if you look at the COVID-19 cases across the nation, we haven't even fucking hit the peak yet, dude. We're not even close. I'm just mad at seeing this because this is just entirely preventable. Let's move on from this before I just start foaming and spitting all over my microphone. Jesus Christ. So I thought this was going to be the end of kind of the bad parts of this program, but nah, not even close. This is, let's get into this. Okay, so we're sick, we're tired, we're unhealthy, but how are we economically? To set this up, I'm going to read a tweet from Richard Wolff that I saw this morning. The worst week of unemployment claims in history was in 1982 at 695,000 jobless people. For each of the last 17 weeks, claims were over 1 million jobless. Yet there's still no government hiring program. Total failure. That's from Richard Wolff. So I'm going to set that. That's to set up the following CNN article, which is to say, this is the last week of $600 unemployment benefits. The end is near for the $600 federal lifeline for millions of unemployed Americans, even though the economy is still far from recovered from the coronavirus pandemic and new layoffs are being announced regularly. The coronavirus relief program technically doesn't expire until July 31st, but this coming week will be the last for which benefits are paid because payments are only provided for weeks ending on either Saturday or Sunday. Jobless Americans will still get state unemployment benefits, but the sunset of Congress's $600 enhancement, part of the $2 trillion economic aid package passed in March, will leave more than 25 million people thousands of dollars poorer each month. And it will expose more of the real pain of mass unemployment, just as many states are reimposing shutdowns. These emergency unemployment benefits have been propping up families and propping up the economy now for several months, said Callie Grant, senior policy analyst at the Georgetown Center of Poverty and Inequality. Ending the benefits prematurely will really set back any economic recovery that might have been on the way. And I just want to reiterate at this point a right-wing talking point that they said that if we just print money to give to people, just print money. So I don't remember what they call this in Congress, but it's like an unfunded program or something like that. You know, because this is like a big thing during Obamacare. He was just like, oh, we're going to pay for this by doing X, and we're going to pay for this by cutting this, and we're going to increase taxes a little bit more. Or you could just print more money. And what the kind of the conservative and liberal talking points were against that was to say that it would increase inflation. Yet we've printed trillions of dollars as a result of these aid packages, and inflation has not increased. They can do it at any time. They can just print more money and give it to us so that we don't fucking starve, but they are not doing it. I don't think it's important for us to belabor how fucking bad this would be that if they don't extend the unemployment benefits. And for those of you, and Jesus Christ, for those of you that are on it and depend on it, I don't know what to say. I'm fucking fuck. But I'm going to contrast it, and I'm going to make it even worse, because this is Eat the Rich, by reading to you something from 2 days ago, from the 17th, which is, and I tweeted, whoever runs the Eat the Rich account tweeted about this, and this is from Reuters, and it says, on the eve of bankruptcy, U.S. firms shower executives with bonuses. Nearly a third of more than 40 large companies seeking U.S. bankruptcy protection during the coronavirus pandemic awarded bonuses to executives within a month of filing their cases, according to Reuters, blah, 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 blah. Under a 2005 bankruptcy law, companies are banned, with few exceptions, from paying executives retention bonuses while in bankruptcy. But the firm seized on a loophole by granting payouts before filing. It's not even a loophole. That's not a fucking loophole. The loophole is, you know, you're going to file for bankruptcy because shit ain't adding up, and you just bleed it for everything that it's worth before you do so. 6 of the 14 companies that approved bonuses within a month of their filings cited business challenges executives faced during the pandemic in justifying the compensation. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Did they fucking really just say that? They cited business challenges executive faced during the pandemic in justifying the compensation. They say that their jobs got harder because of coronavirus, and thusly they require more money. Do you have any idea how hard it is to be an essential worker? How hard it is to be like a delivery driver? Fucking UPS, USPS? And these guys who, you know, oh my God! I'm just going to keep reading. Even more firms paid bonuses in the half-year period before the bankruptcies. 32 of the 45 companies Reuters examined approved or paid bonuses within 6 months of filing. Nearly half authorized payouts within 2 months. 8 companies, including JCPenney and Hertz Global Holdings, approved bonuses as few as 5 days before seeking bankruptcy protection. High Crush Incorporated, a supplier of sand for oil and gas fracking, paid, I'm going to fucking punch something, paid executives bonuses 2 days before the July 12th filing. Oh, this'll do you good. JCPenney forced to temporarily close its 846 department stores and furlough about 78,000 of its 85,000 employees as the pandemic spread. Approved nearly 10 million in payouts just before its May 15 filing. On Wednesday, the company said it would permanently close 152 stores and lay off 1,000 employees. So let's just get this straight. JCPenney stopped paying 92% of its employees, then gave $10 million to executives, then filed for bankruptcy. The company declined to comment for this story, but it said in an earlier statement that bonuses aimed to retain a, quote, talented management team that had made progress on a turnaround before the pandemic. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck. Jesus. feel like this episode really started off kind of slow, and now we're just in a fever pitch. But I hope everyone's still listening to this. I can't fucking believe this. Here's a goodie. Hertz, which recently terminated more than 14,000 workers, paid senior executives bonuses of $1.5 million days before its May 22nd bankruptcy, in part to recognize the uncertainty they faced from the pandemic's impact on travel, the company said in the filing. Recognize the uncertainty that they faced. Imagine the contrast between the uncertainty of a business model versus the uncertainty of, are my children going to have health insurance? And one of those is rewarded with unimaginable wealth. I think about this sometimes. I'm like, in my lifetime, will I earn $1 million? You know what I'm saying? Like if you add up all the money that you make every year, like, will you even make $1 million in a year, or in your lifetime, in your working career? I mean, I've been working since I was like, real young. I think I was babysat as a kid, that's, give me $10 or whatever. It's fun, drink high C, whatever, that's fine. But like, I think my first job, I was a busboy. I was 15. It was actually really fucked up because, I was working, I was a child. And how it worked, I don't know if I haven't worked in a restaurant for, 12 years, something like that, maybe 14 or something. Anyway, but how it worked was, you got restaurant minimum wage, which was like $2 and change or something. And then I was supposed to get 10% of all of the waiters' tips for the night or something. That's what I think I remember the manager, the owner of the restaurant telling me. But the way that it would happen was the manager, the owner of the restaurant was just like, yeah, at the end of the night, go talk to the waiters. And I would go up to them and say, hey, I'm supposed to ask you for the tips for the night or whatever. And most of them, in their probably 20s or 30s would be like, I got a lot of credit card transactions tonight, so I sorry, buddy, I can't get you any cash, but I'll hit you up next time. And I would think I would probably walk out of there, for a Friday evening, Saturday evening with, $40 or something like that. And to me, I was just like, I'm fucking rich. Like, like that's candy or that's, whatever. And then later on, it would be gas money or something if I had to borrow a car, so it was cool at the time. But like, that's stolen wages. I don't remember why I started talking about this. Anyway, the amount of people that don't know the certainty of their lives, and especially if we're going back to the CNN article with the unemployment benefits that are ending next week. We're fucked, guys. Where is the help? What's so crazy is that the wealth gap is widening so much, and I think I won't even cite it, I won't even read it right now because I think we know it, that like the top billionaires in the United States have gained something like $500 billion in the last 6 months during the coronavirus pandemic. They're robber barons. Mark Zuckerberg, robber baron. These guys are they're pilfering us. I'm not being very articulate now, so we're just gonna move on to the last bit of information here. I'm gonna close up this episode by getting canceled for electoralism, because I was looking at Twitter this morning and I saw this tweet from Joe Biden's Twitter account that was like, "We need a president that embraces hope, not fear," and I was just like, oh God. Like, this is the best that we can do. And I remember thinking about this as well when Bernie was edged out of the race. And it's weird. Like, even when I kind of think about and talk about Bernie Sanders right now, I think we could probably agree in thinking just like, I remember tweeting about this, like Bernie was the compromise candidate, like kind of New Deal liberalism, which is what Bernie Sanders was asking for. That was the compromise. That probably could have put, some fucking drywall patches on there for a while, and we could have maybe cruised along for another 10 years or so, made commitments to climate change and stuff, and maybe got along for a little while longer and kicked the can down the road for the real kind of social change that we need and the change of our political economy. The capitalist class chose to edge him out, and he I think we're all feeling a little bit disappointed in him by being like, now he's, talking with Joe Biden, being like, hey, I'm going to help you with your plan and blah, 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 even though Joe Biden put out this like pretty conservative plan for America, the economic plan. But what did we expect from Bernie Sanders? He was never going to be this, socialist savior. He's a United States senator. He's in the Senate. Like, he's a senator. He's not going to be this socialist revolutionary. And where we are now, and I think what was interesting is like, we felt like if that was going to be the compromise candidate, what was the alternative of the burgeoning labor movement in the United States going to look like? And then, protesters took to the streets. Black Lives Matter became part of the national conversation and is in a bigger way than it ever has been. And as of last night, which I will say is extremely fucking cool, let me just get to it here. Riot declared at Portland Police Association headquarters as people set union office on fire. Oh my God. The cop union, they set the cop union on fire. I mean, again, for those that don't know, cops are not workers. It is not a job. They are paid for by the capitalists that run the state to enforce social control and protect private property of the ruling class. They aren't workers. There should be no cop unions. The AFL-CIO should not include cop unions in their, in their ranks and all that stuff. Anyway, but going back to electoralism and Joe Biden, I mean, it's possible that Joe Biden wins the election in November. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen? We certainly had no idea what was going to happen in 2020. Thought 2019 was the worst year we could possibly have. And fuck me, were we wrong. So what's going to happen with Joe Biden? But I thought what was interesting was Nancy Pelosi's statement that she made a few days ago that we should probably bring some attention to understand what two corporate parties look like. And this is from an Axios article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is what she said in a press conference. In the beginning, it says here, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called on President Trump Thursday to exercise, quote, the full power of the Defense Production Act to meet coronavirus equipment needs, and accused him of engaging in a massive dereliction of duty by ignoring science during the pandemic. Ooh, real Hufflepuff fucking behavior there. And, for the record, just on the Defense Production Act, we have a shortage of PPE in America, personal protective equipment, right? Providers need N95 masks. We need nitrile gloves. We need, gowns, every bit of cleaning equipment, hygiene equipment. We need all of these things in order to combat this coronavirus pandemic. Most medical equipment in this country is not produced in this country. It is produced overseas. Why are things produced overseas? Because capitalists wanted to find cheaper labor in order to produce their goods to increase their profit margins. Why is this a problem? Because now there's a case where governments in the countries, let's say, for instance, with gloves or something like that, in the predominantly Southeastern Asian countries that are producing these PPE items, the governments can be seizing them for their own use to protect their own citizens during their own coronavirus issues. And so we're left with fuck all because we just... the dereliction of duty has been from the capitalists that have moved their shit overseas so that they can increase their profit margins. That's why we're in a PPE issue in this country. And I think it's right to invoke the Defense Production Act to commandeer fucking factories from capitalists to create the things that we need in order to save ourselves from this virus. But what she said next was the part that gave me pause and, made me have to dig a tack in my thigh. She said, I'm just going to say this out loud. I yearn for other Republican presidents, Pelosi said at a press conference. While we may have disagreed on many points, at least we had a shared commitment to the governance of our country. I yearn for other Republican presidents. So then why the fuck even bother? Why the fuck even bother running, being the head of the party of the other, of the quote, opposition party? Why even fucking bother? Why do anything? And the answer is she's not. She's not doing anything else. And I thought that there was a very interesting admission that she said at the end of this. At least we had a shared commitment to the governance of our country. And she's right. But if you look at it in the context of her class, she is a centimillionaire. She's worth like $100 million. She did that shit, that fucking James Corden or whatever interview where she like showed the different ice creams that she likes in her dual fucking Viking or Sub-Zero fridges that literally cost like $27,000. It's like, are you serious? What is relatable about this? Don't get me wrong, I get down with ice cream, but I mean, fucking, Jesus. Anyway, and so let's put that in context. These are the Republican presidents that she has been in government with. Reagan, Bush 41 and fucking Bush 43 or whatever, George W. Bush. So when she says we had a shared commitment to governance of our country, she means that, again, in the context of her class interests, which is let us inure the working class, let us not allow the working class to empower themselves, let us keep them down in a way that will stop them from rising up. You know what, we should, this is an interesting point too, in light of Black Lives Matter protests. Let's include this clip right now of her saying a very interesting phrase that that I think we'll all recognize.
This is Shelley Ward, a senior studying journalism and media studies. Shelley, what's your question?
Congratulations on the election.
Thank you.
Do you support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I support the recognition that Black Lives Matter, for sure, and I have incorporated that in many of my statements. I think it is, all lives matter, yes.
Nancy Pelosi is not your friend. She is never going to be your savior. Any liberal that, supports her or says, girl boss shit, whatever, is a moron. It's like she is, she hates you. She hates you. Oh, we got to just play for her the thing of her talking about progressives, where she's like, oh, there's just like 4 of them. Here's what she thinks about actual progressive candidates that identify as democratic socialists.
You have these wings, AOC and her group on one side.
Well, that's like 5 people.
No, it's the progressive group. It's more than 5.
I'm a progressive, yeah.
So yeah, on the electoral front, I honestly think if you ever want to see an example of white privilege, check out Joe Biden that literally may win a presidential election from his basement. They have occasionally reanimated him from his state of torpor to his state of torpor to give a statement or two. Oh God, we've got to include the part where he says, "Mr. President, do your job." This is what it sounds like when they roll Joe Biden out to give a statement.
Mr. President, wake up. Get to work. There's so much more to be done. Thank you.
So the reason I bring this stuff up, and the reason we talk about this in what we were talking about with the American passports thing, is electoralism is not going to get us out of this pickle. Electoralism isn't going to give us the things that we need as people. Electoralism will not allow us to interact and reunite with our families that may be overseas in countries that have disallowed us from traveling to. It's not going to happen by voting in Joe Biden. The only way that we're going to get out of this is to continue creating massive public pressure by putting our bodies in the streets, by occupying pieces of government, by occupying land, by taking it back, because the ruling class that runs both parties, the capitalists that fund them, and the donor class that holds them accountable, the same fucking donor class that is every single one of them is in a picture being with their arm around Ghislaine Maxwell. This is end stage capitalism. I don't know. We've been talking about it for a while, but for some reason this week it really just really kind of sunk in and clicked, and caused me to swear so emphatically on this Patreon episode. Anyway, I think we should probably end it here. I think we've probably had enough. I hope that we all do a little bit of self-care after listening to this. I know I am going to after recording this. So thank you again for listening to us, and we'll stay cool, folks. Until next time.
This storm is coming and it goes down. All the clubs are being closed down. This place is coming like a ghost town. Bands won't play no more. Too much fighting on the dance floor. gonna shout.